Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of the Fintech Hunting Podcast. We have an incredible guest for you today. It is an industry thought leader, a tech visionary, a mover and shaker in financial services. We could not be more pleased to welcome Marty Frame, president of West. Marty, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Michael. It's good to be here. Good to join you today.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have you. Marty, for our listeners who may not know your background, you have an incredible background in financial services, thought leadership, tech visionary. You've led the charge on a lot of tech initiatives. Can you kind of give our audience a background of all of this incredible experience and depth of knowledge?
Sure. Let me try to put it this way. I got my start in this business a long time ago, more than 25 years ago. Kind of doing my own thing and actually trying to automate things for realtors and brokerages on the MLS side at a time when that was hard. I mean, it's commonplace today, but way back then it was hard. From there, I joined Realtor.com when it was a very young company. There were just a few of us at that point. Had an incredible ride with them over the course of a decade in all kinds of different directions. From there, joined Fidelity National Financial and LPS in a joint venture they had, which was focused on delivering title information essentially to consumers, which was exciting. Ultimately, sold that initiative from those two companies over the National Association of Realtors, led a subsidiary they had there called Realtors Property Resource, whose goal was to really provide realtors with, an incredible wealth of information. And from there, joined WFG 3 years ago. And, I guess the theme through all that, and maybe something that's important here is I've always tried to, there's a lot of talk of disruption in our industry and a lot of people focused on it, and a lot of money that kind of comes into that from a lot of places. But I've always been a believer, and I've had the experience and the privilege of trying to, create change from the inside, from a participant in the industry who has a particular sort of convening power. And that's, one of the exciting things about WFG is the role that it plays, with all of its partners, with its customers, its partners, and in the ecosystem, gives you a great place to drive, this kind of progress from.
Oh, excellent background, and I couldn't be more excited to have you as a guest because of that incredible background and knowledge. So one of the things is we start looking at the mortgage industry, and this has been going on for the last few years. There's been a huge push to digitize the mortgage lending process. Where do you think things currently stand in the industry for all of that effort?
Well, I think we all got a big lift from the pandemic. And I think the reason for that was, if you look at over time, a lot of things we talk about as an industry, the ways that we want to change things and the opportunities, a lot of them are not new news. A lot of them are very familiar, and they're things that, companies, individuals, visionaries and otherwise, have been looking to do for a really long time, and talking about, preparing for, and even making some progress on. But just, structurally in our industry, there are a lot of different participants with a lot of different requirements and a regulatory overlay to that, which makes it complicated. So, it was, kind of cool in a difficult period of time was all that kind of got swept away out of necessity. We had a chance to come together as an industry and solve problems in a difficult time. And, the thing that I think we're all looking out for as that period, I'm not sure if it's over yet or not, but, as that period sort of shifted into whatever the new normal is now, was, were those measures, going to be temporary? Or, as an industry and, at the regulatory level, were they going to stick? Were we going to, kind of look back on that time and see that the things that, that we suspended, that we used to be kind of scared about, actually turned out okay, and the ecosystem thrived as a result of it. I think that's where we're at, and I think it's a good place to launch from.
Well, and that is so true, and I've said this numerous times, that you could take somebody's talk, article, speech 10 years ago that talked about the e-mortgage.
Yeah.
and replace it with the word digital, and most of it would still be relevant
It's the same
today.
stuff. It's absolutely the same stuff, right? And the technology changes underneath of it, and the opportunities get more exciting, but you still have to kind of knit, a lot together to make it work, which is the key challenge.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that. You mentioned that it's one of the key challenges. Is that one of the main reasons why this transition has been so difficult to get it all digitized?
I think it's the easy target, right? I mean, we can all look at that, and I don't think you'd find anybody who disagrees that that's a hard problem to solve. If I were to go a level down, I think the other thing we have to do, and maybe it's a driver of change as opposed to the obstacle, what's going to get us there? Clearly a pandemic where people, kind of say, let's clear the decks and do what we need to do. That's one way to do things. But my experience has been, let's maybe think a little bit differently about how we're driving the consumer expectation, the customer expectation. In technology, we all have experiences as consumers of technology and expectations, that we develop as a result. And I think, just from doing this a long time, one of the things that we're challenged by as an industry is putting the consumer first. And, that sounds simple and it sounds a little overbroad, and it's probably not fair in a lot of cases, because there are a lot of people who are really focused on that. But for the consumer, I think it's important to remember that this is a very episodic transaction. It's not something they do every day. It's something they're preoccupied with for sure, but during an interval in time, and then they move on. And it is a heavily referral-driven business, and so the expectations are really not being set first and driven first and foremost by technology, but by what a professional is telling them they should do in order to have an efficient process. And that's where we got to operate. We just got to come up with an offering that focuses on the consumer at that point to differentiate us from the next guy and kind of meet that expectation where it lives, which is ephemeral.
Well, and that is such a good point, because I think for so long the industry has been very transaction focused instead of relationship focused, right? Get the Smith file in, get the Smith file out. And then when volumes go up, it gets even worse, right? It just gets exasperated because we have capacity issues. So what people do, they throw human spackle at it. We just try to get the next transaction done instead of, to your point, really looking at it and saying, from a customer expectation standpoint, what can we do to truly eliminate a lot of the friction? Like you said, it's not a transaction that people do every day. People right now go to Amazon every day, and there's that Amazon effect where they order a book, and if they don't get it in the afternoon, they're kind of pissed off. They'll deal with getting it tomorrow. But,
right. Yeah.
But in the mortgage industry, so what can help move that process forward of really focusing on the customer experience? And then how does that work with the technology and pulling together all of the industry participants?
Yeah, I think you're making a great point, and I think we have to change our mindset. And if we change our mindset, the applications will follow. The point you're making about a transactional mindset, it's an easy point and an easy target to kind of focus on. But if you think about it and you take it to that thought to its full extent, it really means that a lot of the way you build applications has to be different if you don't want to be transactional. If you think that sort of episodic, dealing with a consumer on a transactional level, one and done, on to the next one, not going to see them again. If your applications are built around that expectation, you're going to deliver on that expectation. And there's been a little bit of a trend here, which I've really tried to focus on in the work that I do and the way I think about building applications, and I've seen others doing it. It's really exciting, which is start, instead of from what am I going to do with this transaction today? I've got a transaction, it's got a set of steps, and then I'm done with it. And if the same, person, family, buyer, seller, refinancer shows up tomorrow, I'm starting again. Same thing. It's like Groundhog Day, like I never saw him before, right? And there are ways of building applications, and particularly ways of leveraging data building from data so that if you take the sort of approach that, a person is a person with a history, a property has a history, and what the way we service people and property and transactions is to look at them holistically across time, right? And they have different events. Think of them as ornaments that you're hanging off a tree, right? Different things that happen to a property over time. I'm obviously generalizing, but if you take that approach to an application and you say, okay, so what are we doing on this person, this property today, not, now for the first time? It forces you to build your database, think about your database differently, how your data gets leveraged, how you can leverage that with partners, and suddenly the way you're interacting with people really takes that history into account, and you can create some efficiencies for them because you have information and a history at your disposal.
Well, and you talk about a lot of that data and analytics. What do you think kind of holds some of the lenders and industry participants back from truly leveraging that data? Because data, we've talked about data in the mortgage industry. I've been in the mortgage industry 20 plus years. You've been in the mortgage industry 20 plus years, but I still don't see a lot of lenders really effectively leveraging that data, especially to the point where you mentioned from a holistic view versus just that transaction.
It's tough because, two big reasons, and I think they kind of relate to each other. One is the ownership of the data, is fairly disaggregated, right? So a lot of times,
right.
Unless you're an aggregator, working with a licensed and permissible purpose to aggregate, to build applications from, you may be as a participant in possession of data that's not really yours. You can't create a derivative product from somebody else's data. You have a relationship with another party to use their data to service their transaction that doesn't really allow you to leverage it. And so to me, that's the role of aggregators, right? We don't want to give, we're not an open data industry. Data's not free. This is all the intellectual property of somebody. But there is a role to play for a party or parties with what I think of as and call convening power, the ability to aggregate, add value to, and then distribute data on behalf of the data owners, so that you can get the efficiencies that I think we can all pretty easily imagine if that were to happen.
Perfect. Great insights there. What do you think are in the mortgage origination process? What do you think are some of the biggest opportunities for process improvement?
Well, so they abound, and they're small and they're large. And those are big generalizations, but let me kind of drill down on what I mean by that. I think it's easy to focus on the headline changes, right? We can all imagine how an online closing should be a better experience for a consumer, for the notary, for the closer, for everybody involved, right? I mean, it just makes sense. We can all get on Zoom and do our we can live our life on Zoom. We should be able to close on Zoom. And, those technologies, like a lot of things that we've been talking about, been around forever, waiting for their moment. Their moment's complicated. And, and then over the last year, here it was, right? And, we still have a ways to go with it. So, we can focus on things like that, and they're obvious, and we should. And integrating those moments into the transaction technology, sort of the technology lifecycle of a transaction, so that you're offering a continuous experience from, in the settlement business, from opening through to closing. Those tools tend to be a little bit disaggregated from each other. Putting them together is the obvious thing. Those are the headline type changes that I think we're all focused on. What I think is as important, maybe more important, is everything that happens in the nooks and the crannies, I guess, is the way I'd put it in general terms. There are 1,000 moments in in the life cycle of a file, just thinking about it from the settlement perspective, where you can do better, right? Where we've habituated to throwing a body at it, like you said, spackling it with people, right? And a good technologist observes, goes into his or her system, looks for those moments, and looks for opportunities to automate everything. and you may be taking a minute out of something, you may be taking 5 minutes out of something, and there may be 1,000 such somethings, right? But if you have the ability to find those moments and then focus on, letting the machine do the work of what somebody's doing kind of repetitively in a lot of cases, think of the lift you get from that, right? And it adds up. It adds up not just to hours and days, but weeks. And fundamentally, you have to remember kind of the mission statement here, which is we all think the whole process takes too long, right?
Yep.
So if you can set a goal of let's see if we can take a week out of this. Can I take a week out of this from an efficiency perspective? Yeah, I may not be able to. That may not be everybody else's timetable in terms of the other participants, but I can do my job faster, right?
I love it, and that is so very true. We talked earlier on your background with Realtor.com. Now you're on the settlement services side. Tell me, where do you see kind of that relationship on the lending side and the real estate side, especially going forward and with all the technology that we've just discussed?
It's my perspective on this. I hope it's interesting. It's fascinating to me. Having spent a lot of my career on the real estate side, developing products and services for, real estate agents and brokerages, a simple claim that I can make that that I believe strongly to be true is that, we spend probably too much time focusing on application development for real estate agents who have too many choices to begin with. There's a lot of redundancy there. In other words, I think we're overthinking it. And
interesting.
And there's more being developed there than the market has the ability to absorb, right? And I look at I can cross over to the mortgage and settlement side and say there's not enough, right? I wish, and I understand the structural reasons, the reasons why capital gets allocated to, a little closer to where the consumer is interacting than to where, the file's being serviced on the back end, right? So there's a certain amount of, I don't want to belittle it by calling it sex appeal, but, getting to that first point of contact is where capital sees value. But that, I think we've over allocated. And, I believe strongly that you could take those same principles to, the mortgage and settlement side, where there's a much greater reliance and even dependence on technology than there is on the real estate side, and not enough fuel being applied. And we have the same problems, right? We have the problem of wanting to deliver a better consumer experience. And I think people are starting to realize that. I mean, I do see, a great deal of investment coming into companies who are telling a consumer-centric story about the transaction, which is the right story to tell.
Excellent. Tell me then, so what is WFG working on right now? How's that going to help and improve the real estate transaction for all the participants?
Yeah, I kind of break it down into two categories, and hopefully they're consistent with all that I just said in terms of the kind of the opportunities in the ecosystem, because it's really how we think about it. One is, just start with the simple stuff. Automate everything, right? Look at every moment in your process. Look at it continuously. And apply resources to making it go faster. So we're, focused throughout, throughout our processing operations and the way we, support them with technology, in just making it possible for people to do their jobs more efficiently, and automating a lot of what can be automated. There are lots of those moments. There's a lot more to do, and we've done a lot. Second, we're very focused on consumer and customer collaboration. For a long time here, we've taken a consumer-centric approach to designing applications for our clients and partners. I think you have to lead with that consumer-centric design and user experience expectation, because at the end of the day, we're all consumers of technology, whether we're doing our jobs or whether sitting at home. And working from the perspective, and a a philosophy that we have as a company that's oriented around collaboration, and really driving that through our applications, so that what we offer, is a collaboration platform that increasingly encompasses more and more parties, right? Kind of easy to start with the buyer and seller, easy to start with the lender and realtor, but really start to add value to individuals, to the processor, to the recorder, to every participant all along the chain that we convene, in our moment in the transaction, and building a unified collaboration experience around that.
Oh, great insights. Marty, you and I could continue to go on and on. You've provided so many wonderful insights, suggestions, thought leadership of where the industry is going. I can't thank you enough for being a guest on this episode of the Fintech Hunting Podcast.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's been great to be here, and I do think we're in an exciting moment. So I'm excited to see how it all continues to unfold.
Absolutely.